Hi guys, and welcome back. And today we get on with building the pimped version of the Panther. So this is the second Tamiya Panther D that I'm building as part of the buddy build with Steve Mottram. The first one was straight out of the box, which you've already seen the build for that Panther Part 1. So this is the pimped version Part 1, and this will come in two parts from the build's perspective, mainly because PE is an absolute pain in the butt, and everything has taken way longer than I would have thought. And I'll make a few comments along the way where that sort of impacted the build time. What took 15 minutes to do from an out-of-the-box perspective might have taken 3 hours to do with all the PE. So we'll get along with that as we go. There'll be links to Steve's website below and at the end of the video as well, and a link so you can check his progress with the buddy build. And with that, let's get on with it. So let the build begin. And initially I was a little bit overwhelmed because I had multiple sets of PE, and some of them I realised only when I started doing this part weren't actually for the Tamiya version, and in fact the big set of PE I got from Aber was for the Dragon version, so the instructions were starting to confuse me. And look, just as an overall commentary, I think PE manufacturers need to lift the quality of their instructions. There are way too many vagaries contained within them that don't really make it clear exactly what you're supposed to do and which way you're supposed to bend. Now that's probably definitely a sign of my inexperience, but honestly there's some parts where you just look at it and go, well, the picture doesn't really explain it and the instructions don't even articulate it, and I'm just going to take my best guess. And of course the Haladonian factor always plays out in that case, and if I guess one way, it'll be the wrong way. So just a little frustrating there. So I thought the best thing to do was to go through. I copied the Tamiya instructions and then went through each of the individual sets and marked up the pieces, the Tamiya pieces that they were going to replace, and noted which set was going to do that replacement. So that was a fairly lengthy exercise. And I started at the easy ones first and left the Aber ones till last. And that was when I realized the Aber ones were for the Dragon kit. And that did my head in a little bit. So after doing all that, and that was probably a couple of hours invested in doing that preparation, I decided, all right, I'm going to use the Aber ones first and see how much I can cover with the Aber ones, just working through the diagrams, and then take a deep breath and go back and see, have I missed anything that I've got in any of the other PE sets that I could apply. So that might sound like I overcomplicated it, and it probably feels like I did, but at least it let me move through the build with a reasonable degree of confidence that I'd either captured all the other PE sets and noted them on the instructions, or as a first reference I checked the Aber set to see if there was something there. That might make more sense as we go along, or it may never make sense. That's as good as it gets. So happily, stage one was very straightforward, and it was just the suspension arms and the bits of the lower hull, and it was all straight off from the Tamiya instructions. Stage 2 saw the first of the aftermarket stuff introduced with the drive sprockets and the little hubcaps that go on the top of those, and that was very straightforward to do, so no dramas so far. So there's some really nice detail on these metal parts, and they cleaned up very, very easily. So yeah, look good so far. I don't think I show up a little bit later on when I actually connect them to the suspension arm, or the axle, or whatever it's called. The axle needed to be pared back a little bit because they stuck out too far, but that was very easily done, and it was just a matter of getting all the other kit wheels on so that I could clearly align it to make sure that it was straight. So no big deal, but just something to keep in mind if you're contemplating doing that. Don't glue them on and hope that they're right. Just make sure they check out with the rest of the wheels on the kit. And for the wheels, and in fact all of the other aftermarket parts and PE, I just used plain old super glue, which largely worked okay. And the reason I went with those particular hubcaps was only because they looked to be exactly the same ones that are in the Tamiya kit, so I didn't think too hard about it. I just replicated those. And then we get to the jack, and this was the beginning of my love-hate relationship with little bits of PE and some of the challenges of using the Aber stuff first, which again, as I said earlier, was designed for the Dragon version of this. So not everything fitted quite as it should, but I decided that I was simply going to persevere and make it work, because I was already thinking of building another Panther into the future where I could use the vast majority of the other stuff. So look, I won't go on ad infinitum about the fact that my eyes are rubbish, my fingers are too fat, and the parts are too small, because don't build anything with PE if that's the case. So I soldiered on. It's not the most brilliant work. It's the first exposure I've had to such quantities of PE. So look, you guys will be the judge. I'm reasonably happy with it. It's not the greatest work. I don't have a PE bending tool. You'll see my HAL 1000 a little bit later on that I made along the way. And then onto the mufflers and all the little bits and bobs of PE that go with that. And again, my only observation would be that potentially some of this stuff that is very finicky to build is stuff that's going to be hidden behind other parts that go on subsequently, and you sort of start to scratch your head and think, is it worth the effort? So anyway, because I said I'd do the full version, I persevered and I built everything that I could logically find that fitted onto the kit. So there'll be some bits that go on that will be then masked by subsequent pieces, but that's fine. It's all good practice. The bending for the covers was really relatively easy around the end of a paintbrush, one of the larger ones. And the rest was just magnifying glasses, and I haven't been able to film a lot of that stuff because my nose is literally centimetres away from the actual PE with my high strength magnifying glasses on my eyes, and I can't see anything other than a range of about 2.5 inches, so very hard to film with my giant buff head in the way. And this is a good example of the fact that this kit's for the Dragon kit. So the Dragon kit exhaust pipe must be of a smaller circumference, because these were quite, well, it's only 1 millimetre, but it looks huge when you zoom in. And again, the universal apology for any of the lack of focus on the real close-ups. I need to invest in a better macro lens than what comes as stock standard on the old iPhone. And the reason I look like an absolute klutz when it comes to putting in what you would all consider to be relatively simple parts using Tamiya extra thin plastic on plastic is because between me and the kit is the camera, and I actually don't have a pair of glasses that quite deal with that vision, so it's all a bit of a touch and feel exercise. So I'm normally a little bit more competent when I'm not separated from the actual model by the camera. So I just thought I had to explain that because it looked embarrassing when I was watching it back. And God, you can't even get it in the hole, man. And this was pure guesswork as to where I put these little brackets, and the future tape will show that I didn't get it too far wrong. But very imprecise on the diagram and at Dragon kit compared to a Tamiya kit, so dimensions out slightly, and it worked out alright. In hindsight, I would have read ahead a little bit and realised that they had to align with other parts, but that's modelling, isn't it? Now, the tow hooks were interesting because on the surface I thought, well, these will be a piece of cake. But they weren't, of course, nothing ever is. Firstly, I had to enlarge in the hole. That's no big deal, you'll see that happen. But the thing that really did my head in was when looking at the instructions, there's supposed to be a hole at the end that sticks out, and you're supposed to use a very thin piece of wire to sort of form a pin that goes through there. So two things were, there was no hole, and I had no heart left in me at this stage to try and drill a hole in a round surface that small, so there is no pin. So I'm not sure if that was a fault in the casting, that the hole that should have been there wasn't there, or if it's actually an expectation that you drill it. Again, the instructions are suitably vague on that particular matter. So anyway, they've got no pin, and I can live with that. And you'll notice here that I actually glue the tow hooks in place with super glue, and that's just to reflect the angle that they should be hanging at, because the tank will be parked on a gentle slope. And I thought I may as well do that now, and I could have done it any time, but it was just easier to do it now. So that's the only reason I glued them, so they hang in the right spot. And if we just take a second while we look at these, and I wanted to just let you know the time comparison to this stage. So to this stage, building it out of the box, quite honestly was about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes tops. That's finding them, cutting them off the sprue, cleaning them up, and sticking them on. On the other hand, this version, the pimped version, that what you see there, which is rather pitiful, represents about 3.5 hours worth of work. So whilst I like the outcome, and maybe with more experience I would be faster, and maybe with a Tamiya version of the PE it would be easier, but nevertheless it started to become more of a grind than a joy, and that sort of is consistent with the rest of what happens as we go along. I think it looks okay, but from a doing perspective, I think possibly we all share the same view that Tamiya kits are somewhat therapeutic, that you can just shake the box, throw a bit of glue in, and they come out, and you don't have to think too hard. It's relaxing, and you get a good result. This was a lot of thinking, a little bit harder than the normal, and very, very time consuming. Not necessarily a detrimental thing, but just an observation of that was my experience with it all. And nearing the end now, so just the last couple of bits for the back plate. The storage baskets were quite a big job. I won't talk much through that, I'll just let you watch it. All went together well. I might pipe back up when we get to the latches because that was the challenge. Really like the little piece of chain here. It looks, I think it looks really good. So I needed a slightly forgiving surface to do the burnishing for the back of the storage bin, and ended up settling on the mouse pad, which seemed to work really well. Now, the latches and the hinges, for me, were a bit of a nightmare. Very, very small, very, very fiddly, and with, again, my level of vision, it's only really when you look at it under the cameras that you fully appreciate how poor a job I did, which is a bit disappointing because I did try and put a fair bit of effort into it, so clearly practice will be necessary to get these things better. I think about someone like Panzermeister 36, who I saw make some of these a while ago, and they were operational, they were functional, and they were very clean and tidy, and it just did my head in because I could go nowhere near replicating that. But from normal distance, I think they look alright, but they don't bear scrutiny up close. So that pretty much finishes off the rear. Again, probably the baskets themselves are another 3 hours compared to maybe 5 minutes just from the out of the box kit. So a much bigger investment in time. I think they look really good. The proof, I think, will be when the undercoat goes on both of the vehicles. That'll be a good direct comparison at that point, I believe. At this point, I've just glued the wheels on with a little bit of white glue. I want them to be able to come off easily, but I also wanted to be able to make sure that the tracks were aligning properly, and I wanted the wheels in place to do that. The Frural tracks were just wonderful. They had a really great weight to them, cleaned up nicely, and all went together really, really easily. So really happy with that. I tried a few different ways, as you'll see along the journey. I won't talk much throughout it. So one was with just staplers out of the stapler, which I had to straighten one end and then do a bit of trimming. And then I later found some flat staplers. Well, I didn't find them so much as I stole them from work in one of the printing machines that staples things. They were easier to use and I could cut them just slightly short of length and had no cleanup at all. So all in all, great fun. Time consuming, but great fun, no great stress. And I think they just look wonderful once they're all completed. It was important to drill out the holes for the staples to go in. If you tried to do it without drilling out the holes, the staples would invariably bend or buckle. So it didn't take a lot of time, but you definitely need to do it for each one. And I had decided right from the get-go that it was probably going to be easy to clean them up for some of the more tricky bits inside the guide horns, etc. Once I had the full run built. And I did that and just used the Dremel to tidy them up, and that worked really well. Now, along the way, I had just been using the open razor blade to do some of the PE stuff, but having nearly removed several parts of my fingers, I decided that I needed to invest in a little bit of design work, and this is what I came up with, the L1000 PE Dominator. These things are just great. I mean, they've got a magnificent weight to them when they're on the tank, so it just feels so much different to the plastic tracks or the magic tracks, rubber band tracks, whatever. The sag is natural and it just looks good. And yep, they're expensive, but I think I'll be doing this again for future vehicles because they are really, really good. Just a few comparison photos now of the out-of-the-box tank to this stage versus the pimped version, and then I'll come back and say goodbye. And that's it. So thanks for watching, and don't forget to like if you like, thumbs up, and subscribe so you keep updated before the new releases. And as always, really look forward to your comments. So I hope you enjoyed the video and the comparison of the two. And the next one out will be the Dio base for this, which shouldn't be too far away because I've got most of it done. And then will be the upper hull. Thanks for your time, and goodbye. Click on the link to check out Steve's channel and his great Panther build.